Now, the video in question that we're going to review today, this one. So Alex O'Connor, run over or double it and give it to the next person. Is of course about logical paradoxes and the most moral choice given really what could be considered almost an impossible situation. What would you do? What would you do? I think it's a very well put together video. But really the core of what we are discussing today is the following. For the few of you that don't know who Alex O'Connor is, it's like Alex O'Connor is a very famous, popular content creator. He has 524 videos, almost 1.5 million subscribers. And as he describes himself, he says, "Hi, I'm Alex O'Connor. I host the Within Reason podcast featuring guests including Richard Dawkins, Rainn Wilson, Sam Harris, and Neil deGrasse Tyson." And he, of course, has a presence in all sorts of social media platforms. Now, one thing that I want to say before I open a Photoshop thing that I prepared just to show you exactly where me and Alex O'Connor stand, I want to say this. Alex O'Connor is famous for not only having conversations with all sorts of thinkers, but also specifically for debating Christians and Christianity. I want to say this. To introduce Alex O'Connor, to those of you who don't know anything about him, I would describe Alex O'Connor as a very intelligent, very articulate, and quite fair content creator. I like him very much. Me and him are on opposite positions, since he's an atheist and I'm a Christian. I disagree at a fundamental level with his positions and ideas, which is the reason why I'm making this video today. The video that we're going to discuss together, this one here, is really based on these paradoxes. And they are really a situation where your ability to make a choice in an impossible situation kind of defines your morality or your approach to morality. Now, having established that Alex and I come from two completely opposite foundations for our morality. Me being a Christian, I think morality comes from God. Him being an atheist, I don't want to put words in his mouth. It would be great if he could define it. I didn't have much time to find a specific definition, but I think we can all agree, and it's safe to say without risking to strawmanning the man, that he believes that morality is fundamentally a man-made construct born within the mind of human beings. Now, whether or not he considers that as a natural, maybe some beneficial evolutionary trait, I don't know how he describes it, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think we can be safe and say that he believes that morality is born within us, whereas my position is that morality comes directly from God. And of course, I respect you guys, whatever idea you have. But what I think is interesting in this scenario is, considering the fact that we find the roots of our personal morality in completely opposite positions, what happens if we both watch an impossible situation? Would we come to the same conclusion? In other words, is there a tether between the morality that a religious person has or the morality that a non-religious person has? Or are we going to experience a fundamentally different and, in fact, even maybe opposite decision when it comes to a choice like this? All right, so just so we're clear where we're at. If we were to create a diagram like the one that I presented here and say for a moment that on this side of the spectrum we've got atheism, and on the other side of the spectrum for this discussion we've got Christianity. I hope I didn't misspell anything. I don't think I did. And let's imagine for a second that we have someone who is indecisive. Okay? So we've got someone in the middle. This could be you. Maybe it could be one of you. In fact, let me know. He's not an atheist. He's not a Christian. He doesn't know. He hasn't made up his mind necessarily. In this spectrum, this line represents not only where you stand when it comes to are you a Christian or are you an atheist, but it could also represent, depending how further to the polar end we go, how tolerant or intolerant you are, aka how combative you are with the opposite side. Okay? So let's imagine for a second, for the sake of argument, here we've got, imagine some kind, I couldn't think of someone famous, so just put someone here. On the very end, this man is a Christian, but he's one of those Christians. He says that you cannot be moral if you're not a Christian. Next item of discussion would be the likes of Richard Dawkins. He describes himself as a militant atheist. So the type of atheist that absolutely despises Christianity, Christian doctrine, religion in general, we could say, but although he does appreciate the art and cultural manifestations that come through religion, he does say that, but he has said that he thinks that the Bible or the idea of Christ sacrificing to him is abhorrent. He has said that. Okay, so I think it's fine to put him here because he's an atheist, and also he is a militant atheist. Now, let's place me and Alex. So I would put Alex here, and I would put myself here. What does this mean? Well, Alex O'Connor is, by his own definition, a non-combative atheist. So, differently from any person that you want to put here, he doesn't seem to be interested in insulting people. He is an atheist. He absolutely goes here. Maybe there are on some aspects, like for instance, life after death, I believe he said he's agnostic. But in general, I would put him here in the atheism section. But he's definitely someone who doesn't appear to hate Christians and is very happy to sit down and have a conversation with a Christian. Likewise, and this is the bottom line of this discussion, the reason why I've chosen him over him in this scenario is because I am exactly his polar opposite. Exactly his polar opposite. So I am a non-combative Christian. I am a Christian who is willing to sit down and discuss with an atheist over a coffee, talk about differences. I don't hate atheists. I'm not going to start an attack you, scream at you or anything like that. That's me. What I want to underline is that by placing myself here, this has only to do, the horizontal line is not a representation of conviction, because if this was a representation of conviction, I would have put myself at the very end here, because I am convinced that there is a God and convinced that Christ is King and Lord. This is not a position that I'm putting. So I'm just to be sure that I'm not like, yeah, maybe there is absolute. That's not me. I will be at the end. But this line here only represents your attitude towards the other side, just to make sure that we know where we stand. That's why I think this would be a good situation. We are on polar opposites, and that's why I want to see if we come to different conclusions when presented with impossible odds from a moral perspective.
Would you kill one person or double it and give it to the next person? Okay, on first thought, the answer seems obvious. Double it and give it to the next person. That person will get to decide whether to kill 2 people or give it to the next person. If they choose the next person, that person will choose between 4 people, or the next person 8 people, then the next person. And so if everybody just keeps passing it on to the next person, as long as there's no end to this, presumably nobody has to die. But it on to the next person, as long as there's no end to this, presumably nobody has to die. But we have to be rational here. Human beings are not perfectly moral, and especially if this does go on infinitely, which we're just going to park some of the laws of physics in order to allow for that to happen. Given an infinite amount of time, anything that could possibly happen is guaranteed to happen. Right. If this genuinely goes on forever without end, then as long as it's possible for at least one person to pull that lever, it's guaranteed to happen at some point.
Okay, so this already, before he actually says his conclusion, if we remove the laws of physics for a moment, and we say this will, we know, we are here, I'm here, you are here, and we are told this will continue forever. If this will continue forever, it means that categorically, eventually, mathematically speaking, someone will pull that lever. At that point, I would say pull the lever. Because if this continues forever and you pull the lever, you only have one victim. It's a horrible thing, but I mean, you have been placed in an impossible situation. But if you don't pull the lever, you are specifically ensuring that the train may, in fact, off potentially millions. So from a morality perspective, if you don't pull the lever, you are tangentially causing the death of a potentially infinite number of people. So, yeah, I think I would say I really would do anything I can to not be put in this position. But saying that there is nothing I can do about it, logically would make sense to do this in this scenario.